Everybody, we're going to try to be respectful of everyone's time. So I'm going to go ahead and have John Willardson introduce our speaker. Thank you for joining us, and this will be recorded.
Good morning. I'm John Willardson. I'm a lawyer in Wilkesboro and have the privilege of serving on the North Carolina State Bar Council. It's my privilege this morning to introduce to you Peter Bolac, who is the Assistant Executive Director of the North Carolina State Bar, and also the Director of Continuing Legal Education for the North Carolina State Bar. And Peter will be sharing with us some major changes that are occurring with regard to CLE requirements. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thanks, John. It's always good to see you. And then to see Majib on here. He's a former counselor of the State Bar as well. So it's good to have you guys here. And I really appreciate you giving me the chance today to present to you on some of the proposed changes to the CLE rules that have come out of the CLE board and have been published by the State Bar Council. And I want to kind of give you an update on them, a little bit of a summary of the proposed rules, and then make sure that we have time for your questions or comments. And so if you have any of those, you could put those comments in the chat, and I'll either try to, if I see them, then I'll just go right to it and answer those, or if Ashley or Lynette or someone else wants to interrupt me with a question, feel free to do that too. I want to make this kind of a free-flowing conversation here after this beginning update, because I know there's always comments and questions, and the rules are there's a lot of rules, and so I want to make sure that if you have a specific question about one of them, that we get to it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here for a quick little presentation. And so I want to just give you an update on the CLE requirements, and just quickly about the board and this process. CLE became mandatory 35 years ago in 1987 by order of the Supreme Court, and really there hasn't been a big structural change since that time. At that point, there was a 12-hour requirement, and it had to be done in a year, and the way that the attendance fees and applications and all of that was pretty much is in place in the same way that it was in 1987. Well, a lot has changed since then, as you know. Computers and on-demand courses and online courses have come into existence, and the ability to track attendance and do things electronically and file reports electronically certainly has changed the way we do things at CLE, and probably most importantly, the size of the bar is at least tripled since then. So, maybe I have at least doubled, but I bet it was only around 12,000 at that point in 1987. So we started to look at these rules a couple years ago at the CLE board. We interviewed other state directors and looked at surveys of their programs to see what works and what doesn't work. And the overarching goal of the process was to increase flexibility for lawyers, give you more time, and let you take CLEs on at a pace that works for you, at times for your practice that work for you. Leverage technology in a way that makes things more efficient and improves our efficiency here in the office, and try to get to a point where we can continue to administer this program without having to increase staff size, without having to try with this. One of the things is this was not an attempt to increase revenue for the CLE board. Nothing we're doing is an attempt to make more money. There might be some shifting of how the finances work that I'll talk about, but it's not in any sort of effort to increase the revenue of the CLE program. It's just try to improve our efficiency and make things more flexible and easier for lawyers to manage. So out of this study came some really big changes, proposed changes to the CLE rules. And there were some, the CLE board met last week and made some tweaks that I'll talk about that are going to be proposed to the council next week for republication, some tweaks to these proposals. So the first big change is increasing and changing the lawyer's reporting period from 1 year to 3 years. So the proposal is that lawyers would have 3 years to complete 36 hours, including 1 technology hour, 1 substance abuse mental health that has, the definition of that has changed a little bit, but the same idea as before, and 6 ethics hours. And what we would do is stagger this initially, so we'd end up having 1/3 of the bar having their reporting period come due each year. And another big change for lawyers, I think you'll appreciate, is that we'd eliminate the annual report requirement. So back in the day when all of this was done on at best spreadsheets, but most likely on paper, we needed lawyers to report to us making sure that our records were correct and correcting, adding courses or deleting courses as necessary. But as our ability to do all of this in a database and online has improved, we feel like the need for lawyers to go online at the end of February and check a box to tell us what we should already know is not as important. So this would eliminate that annual report requirement. If you've hit your hours and you're compliant with your requirements, then there's no need for you to have to come on and tell us that. We already know it. So we're going to have the ability to add and delete courses like we do in the annual report. We're going to have that available all the time in the portal, and we'll be sending out periodic updates to lawyers and status updates so they know when they're coming due and if they're still deficient in their requirements. But there's no need to do an annual report and get dinged if you accidentally come on a few days late to do it and get a late fee for it. So we're going to eliminate that whole process. And one of the big changes is to change how fees work here in this in CLE. So right now, every course that you take, for every hour that you take, there's a charge of $3.50 per hour. Now that is either paid by the sponsor, or sometimes you'll end up getting a bill from the state bar, which I'm guessing many of you got in the last couple of weeks, telling you that you owe CLE attendance fees. And sometimes that's for $3.50. Sometimes that's for $12, or just it became an administrative nightmare to try to become a bill collector for 30,000 lawyers for really small amounts of money that really was not a good use of anybody's time or resources. And so the proposed change is to eliminate that attendance fee, that $3.50 per hour attendance fee, and move towards course application fees that would be paid by the sponsor upon submission of a course for approval, and an annual attendance fee paid by the lawyers during your dues renewal process. We kind of anticipate that would be about $25, which when you compare it to what the ABA currently says is North Carolina's cost to practice, they use $42 as part of your CLE cost to practice, because that's 12 times the current $3.50 per hour. So we think that this is potentially an improvement for lawyers in terms of costs for CLE, since it'll probably likely would be $25. And in terms of efficiency for us, this is much better because we're collecting funds at the front end of these processes instead of having to become bill collectors on the back end. Where's my mouse? So another change is the way that we will be dealing with the CLE year. We'd eliminate the current grace period, which exists in January and February of every year, that allows you to either take CLE for the prior year or CLE for the current year. And so it'd be a 12-month CLE year. And we did keep the year ending at the end of February. This was a discussion of the board. Should we move to a straight annual calendar year? Should we move to a fiscal year type setup, July through June? Ultimately, we decided that lawyers are creatures of habit and ingrained in the North Carolina legal mind is that CLE ends in February. So the current rules say that that's when the reporting period would end. The annual calendar year could create some difficulties with lawyers trying to take CLE during the holidays, or our staff trying to be helpful and help administer the program while also trying to take vacation in December. So we are comfortable with the March through February 12-month period. Okay, so this is a change from what you might have read in the journal and online. The initial proposed set of changes eliminated carryover credit. And I'm sure some of you are sent in a comment, because we got a lot of comments saying, I don't care what else you do with these rules, but don't take away my ability to get carryover credit. And so the board last week looked at the comments and saw that some of the arguments for keeping some carryover credit had merit, including, you don't want to disincentivize somebody from taking a course because they're not going to get credit for it because they've already hit their max. And some people wanted that ability to create a little buffer of hours just in case they counted wrong and they ended up, they don't want to end up a couple hours short because they were trying to hit it exactly at 36. And so we tried to find a good compromise, because we don't want to create a situation where lawyers can earn so much carryover credit that they could go, they could really build up their hours in the first year of their 3-year reporting period. And then if they build up so much credit, they might not have to take CLE again for 5 or 6 years. And that doesn't, that's something that the board was really concerned about. So we wanted to allow some carryover credit. The board is proposing up to 6 hours at the end of your reporting period can transfer over, and it would transfer over as total hours. It's not gonna, the board is proposing that you wouldn't be able to satisfy any of your specialty credits like ethics or technology or substance abuse from carryover hours. They want those to be taken each 3-year period, and not something that you can load up on and then not have to take substance abuse or technology for 4 or 5 years or something like that. So they want that to be in every reporting period. So your carryover would just transfer over as part of your 36 total hour requirement. And along with all of a lot of these good things and changes for flexibility for lawyers, we're going to improve the enforcement mechanism for people who are non-compliant. We're shifting the focus towards people who are not compliant with hours, because we're eliminating that annual report requirement. We don't want to penalize lawyers who just failed to go in and click a button. So we're going to focus this on those who are deficient with hours, and we're going to speed up the enforcement process so it doesn't take almost up to a year for a lawyer to get suspended for CLE non-compliance, or we're going to and increase some non-compliance fees as it relates to CLE. So some of the big questions that I got during the comment period were, when is this going to happen? And all of my answers during the comment period were, well, we expect this to happen March 1st, 2023, assuming we get the council's approval and then the Supreme Court's approval for the rule change. But the CLE board met last week, and we want to make sure we do this right. We had some comments that made us think a little bit about the process, making sure that we have an actual good plan in place. And we want to make sure we have time to communicate all these changes to the lawyers and to the providers. And so the board has put a proposal into the rules that would say these would not become effective until March 1st, 2024. So we put it off a year in order to make sure that we have implemented this correctly, that we've programmed it correctly, that we don't have any unforeseen issues pop up, and give us time to deal with those if they do pop up. So this would not begin this next CLE year, it would begin in 2024. And in addition to lawyers upset about losing carryover credit in general, they were concerned that any carryover credit they had currently earned, they wanted that to make sure that that transferred over. And we did put something in our proposed rules last week that says credit hours, carryover hours earned pursuant to the rules in effect at the time will carry over to the first reporting period under the amended rules. So if you had 12 hours earned over your requirement that first reporting period, you'll be able to transfer those over into the new system. So you're not going to lose anything that you've already earned. We didn't feel that that would have been fair for lawyers either. Oops, I answered these things and I forgot to click on it and show you. So the current plan to divide the members into these reporting periods is probably going to be based off of your year of admittance into the bar. We'll use the last digit of your admitting year to divide lawyers into groups. To say, you know, if you end in 0, 1, 2, and 3, you'll be in group 1, 4, 5, and 6, group 2, 7, 8, and 9, group 3. This gives a good kind of age break for all three groups. Will have similar geographical diversity and similar experience diversity, so we can have you know, it doesn't feel like all the young people are in one group, and so none of the CLEs for a couple of years have any of the newer lawyers in it. We wanted to break it up a little bit like that, and we'll have to create the stagger in order to have a third of the bar due each year. So the first year that we do this, there'll be one group that has 1 year 12-hour requirement like normal, and then a group that has a 2 year 24-hour requirement, and then a group that goes right into the 3 year 36 requirement. And then after that, everybody will be on a 3-year reporting period. So that's something that we'll have to do whenever it is that we make this change. And all of this will be communicated in a way that you won't be confused with what your requirements are. We really don't want, you know, there'll always be some lawyers who say they hadn't heard this and they didn't know about it, but we're going to do our best to try to make it, make that number very small. And we've always tried to operate since I've been at the bar with the idea that if you don't know what's happening with the bar, it's because you've chosen not to pay attention, or you've chosen not to know. We want to get this information out in every way possible. So I've been going to different organizations like this one and different district bars to try to present these rules and just answer any questions at the front end. And I'll continue to do that. And we're going to do the same thing with providers and give them a chance to know what's coming down the pike, so no one feels like they've been blindsided. I talked about this a little bit as it relates to the CLE year ending in February. And then there are some additional changes to the rules that I want to make sure you guys know about or take a look at in the journal and online. On-demand courses would be approved for 3 years. There'd be a different fee for on-demand courses. And then after a 3-year period, those courses would have to be recertified by the provider that the law is still good, that the material is still relevant. One of the things we see now that we have concerns with is providers would just roll over their on-demand courses from year to year. And so you might have something that's 10, 12, 15 years old in your catalog. And it's probably likely that the law has changed in a way that makes that CLE really useless for the lawyer as it relates to maintaining their competence. So we're going to have a 3-year initial period for on-demand, and then it'll be an annual recertification that the material is still good. We've made some language changes to the substance abuse mental health definition. It's now going to be called professional well-being, and we made language changes to correspond with changes in medical terminology or the way that this field looks at these issues related to lawyers' fitness to practice. Try to take out words that can have troubling meanings or different, double meanings in a way that can isolate people in a way that really is not appropriate, or the intent of that words, things like impairment and all of things like that. So we're trying to work, making sure that language is modernized, and we got the lap boards looking at it and approve the proposed changes there. So it'll be called professional well-being instead of the substance abuse mental health. We've created a new option for ethics credit. So it's not a requirement. It's not something that you have to take, but there's a new ethics option called social responsibility that relates to the intersection of the practice of law and access to justice, diversity, inclusion, bias, and all of that related to the practice of law. And so that's an hour that would count as ethics credit, but it's not going to be required for lawyers. It's just an option that you take as a different kind of ethics credit in the new rules. We're going to try to make the directory better. So if lawyers are searching for free courses or low cost CLE, we want to make it so that information is available on our website and have providers give us that information during the application process. We hope that will work to constrain CLE costs because the competition will be a lot more open and visible for lawyers to choose which kind of CLE they want for their practice. You'll be doing your exemptions during the annual dues process. So, one of the goals is to, if you really don't want to deal with the bar, hopefully with these changes, you will only have to deal with us once a year. You go in during your dues, you pay your CLE attendance fee, if you have an exemption to CLE, you would do all that in one process and not have to remember that there's 2 times a year that you've got to go on and deal with the state bar. So I hope that you would want to deal with us more, but if that's all you ever want to do, then we're trying to combine it into one good process for you. And just remember, if you're a board certified specialist, that your requirements under your specialization rules don't change with this. So if you have, to take 60 hours over a 5-year period during your recertification, all of that is not changed. So those rules are under the Board of Specialization. They're not CLE rules. So just make sure that you stay aware of any of your requirements as it relates to specialists. So we have these rules in the journal of the last edition. The board is recommending that we republish the rules again for another quarter. So since it's such a big deal, we want to make sure lawyers have had a chance to review them and send in the comments. And so we want to have them published again in the next journal and online, with the hope that they go up for a vote with the State Bar Council in October, and then on to the Supreme Court for approval. The Supreme Court has to approve all of the State Bar's rules. And so I've met with Chief Justice Newby to preview them, and hopefully that these rules will be something that he supports. We do intend to maintain our historical funding for the Equal Access to Justice Commission and the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism, which currently receive funding from that $3.50 attendance fee. So we want to make sure that we can maintain that funding. We're not trying to increase our funding, but we do want to try to maintain our current funding levels so that we can support the programs that are relying on the CLE board for funding. If you have comments about these rules after you look at them, or the new set after they're published after the July meeting, please send them to me. It's been really helpful. As you can tell by the actions of the board last week, they do have an effect. They're not just getting sent here and going into a dustbin. And we reviewed every comment, and the fact that we had so many comments about carryover and comments about other little things, we made changes related to those comments. And so you can have an effect and an impact on these rules by sending in your thoughts and suggestions to us, because we do take those very seriously. That's kind of my little PowerPoint in a nutshell. So I will close this up and be happy to take any kind of questions that you have. I know that everyone doesn't want to spend all day talking about CLE, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Let me pull up the chat and see if there's any in here. Yeah, there's a question about a low, carryover being kind of low. And if you think about it, it's not, I try to think about with a 3-year requirement that it's the only year that you would really need carryover, or that you could potentially lose your carryover, is that 3rd year. Because if you took 15 hours in year 1, it's not like you're carrying anything over to year 2. You're still in your reporting period, so you would have another 2 years to do 21 more hours. And if you took 15 hours in year 2, then you would only need 6 hours left, and that's the year that you could potentially lose some hours, is if you took 15 hours again in year 3. So it's that 6 hours we think really kind of applies to whatever it is you're doing in that last year to get you over the hump, and that was a compromise for the board. We struggled with the right number. There wasn't a lot of desire to go much higher. We think that gives you that buffer, and if there's a course at the end of your reporting period and you have 35 hours, but it's a 5-hour course or 4-hour course, we hope that's not going to disincentivize you then to take that course, because you have that little extra that you'll be able to transfer over. I know it's not going to please everybody, but it was hopefully a good compromise that we could at least restore some carryover to lawyers based, as compared to the initial proposal. There's another one about costs, and I agree. I think that's one of the things that we've noticed is that there's such a wide range of CLE costs. Some things are very low cost, some are high cost, and we can't control the market and require people to have different, set max costs, but we could share that information so you have the ability to make choices on what CLE is important to you. And we don't want lawyers to just be taking the cheapest CLE possible. We want you to take the CLE that helps your competence in your area of practice and all of that. But at least you'd have those options if depending on your situation. If you really need something low cost, you'd be able to filter and search for that in the directory. Does anyone have any other? I think those are the only 2 questions I noticed or comments and questions from the chat. But is there anything that you guys want to talk about? I'm also always here if there's anything just related to the state bar that you want to talk about, I can find a way to get John to have to answer it. But I'm always, if there's anything going on at the bar that you are concerned about or have questions with, I'd love to talk about that. I'd love to talk about the CLE rules and come back again later this year to do another update. But please, if you have comments, please send them to me or give me a call, because we want to get this right. And I'm sure we'll have to make some changes again after the first year or 2, just because there will be something unforeseen. But we're going to try to get this right as quick as possible, so then you'll know going forward, how this is all going to work.
If anyone has any specific questions for Peter, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask. All right. Well, Peter, thank you so much for sharing this information. I thought it was really informing, and we really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, Lynette. I mean, the next steps for the board and the process is that they're going to republish these some rules. I believe the council will vote to do that next week, and then the CLE board is going to get together the beginning of August and work on a proposed fee schedule. So we're going to get that out so lawyers will have a chance to look at that before all of the voting happens in October, just so you have an idea on what we mean by a course application fee or the annual attendance fee, those things. So those numbers don't just, they're not imaginary. We want to make sure that lawyers understand what we mean. I think the original operating thought was for course applications, it would be something like $50 per hour that you're seeking approval for. And then there's no after the fact attendance fee. So it's really just that's all that sponsors have to pay. And then it's not based off of the number of lawyers who are attending. So there's going to be a lot of courses. I think sponsors see a benefit in this because they're not having to pay that $3.50 per hour per attendee. But we're going to try to get a fair fee schedule that is also fair towards organizations that are offering low cost and free CLE and organizations that intend to do CLE training for a small number of people. We're going to try to figure all of this out to get something out there that providers can take a look at and start adjusting to, and have a year to change their plans if they need to, as it relates to how they offer CLE.
Well, thanks again, and please remember that NCADA provides quality CLE, and we hope you'll spend your CLE dollars with us to the members. Peter, you're welcome to join us for any of our programming as well.
I appreciate it.
So, thank you. Well, I'm going to call it to the end unless somebody else has a question, and I hope everyone has a great day. We appreciate it.
Thank you for taking the time to join me this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, John.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Peter.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Sure.
Bye-bye.